cash crisis. We're talking about Venezuela once again.
Systemic important banks. They removed the one factor thing on there called monetary preparedness.
All right, we are alive for a earlier RTD News update, but I wanted to plug in briefly, share with you some recent announcements on the rebranding and restructuring of our current national currency from the physical into the digital realm. And what's interesting about today's information is that it's appears to be a bill put forth to have the Treasury, which is the actual overseer of our financial, situation here in the U.S. As the leader of this digital rebranding. So I want to talk about that, share my 2 cents on, as well as share with you some information that kind of puts it in question. But anyway, hope everyone's doing well. Welcome back to RTD News Update as well. Want to make sure I welcome any first-time viewers to the community. If you are new, definitely let me know where you're watching from via chat. And then, of course, I got to make sure that you guys stay connected when we do things like this by clicking on the subscribe button to make sure you're notified. And then also make sure you click the bell notification. Hopefully the algorithms let you know when we plug in live so that you can join us in real time and share your thoughts and comments. But as always, want to make sure I get through as much information as I can in a short and concise time frame. So I want to do that. So let's jump right in. So I had a chance to thumb through what I believe is a very interesting bill. And so, of course, I had to throw a little art on top of that, but curious to get your guys' thoughts on that because these are the four political figures that have put forth a bill. And as I always say in the past, none of these bills are new. I've talked about this for several years now. Every single piece of legislation brought forth from DC originates more than likely by the think tank, special interest groups, or the too big to fail banks themselves, and they happen to have them stockpiled in a file cabinet in one of these politicians' office. And given the current environment, they tend to go into the file cabinet, pull it out, and there you go. We have a bill that's sponsored by this or that type of politician here. So we have the ECASH Act, which came out literally an hour or two ago, and so I want to dive through it briefly. I had a chance to skim through some of the, some of the bolts and nuggets of it. And it's interesting to say the least, but I'm always skeptical because once again, we have politicians looking to paper over or digitize over some problems that were created by them. And ultimately, it's not really a solution to our problems because it's trending towards that digital world, which has its concerns in and of itself. So let's jump right in and I'll dive further. Curious to get your thoughts on this artwork as well. Feel free to leave a comment. But let me just jump right in. Here we have the article. U.S. ECASH bill proposes digital currency that replicates cash and bypasses the Fed. So in and of itself, that headline there would definitely catch your attention because it says a lot of interesting things within there. It replicates cash, and I'm going to explain to you how they propose that. And on top of that, the technology that they are hinting at, I don't believe our government has the capability of rolling that out there in and of itself. So that's a concern. And there's no real details as to how they're going to pull that off. But then again, I have some information from maybe about 30 years ago that can give a little bit more light as to how they might try to pull this off if it gets to that point. But and bypass the Fed. So bypassing the Fed is always a good thing. But once again, when the Fed and our Treasury work hand in hand to restructure our current monetary world order, I'm a little bit leery on that. But I'll just thumb through this briefly, then we'll dive in even deeper. It says Electronic Currency and Security Act, ECASH Act, introduced today in the United States House of Representatives, could herald a new direction in the government-sponsored digital currencies. And so once again, we're heading to the digital world. And that's what it is. What it is. But I'm always scared. I'm always very skeptical, rather, of who and how it's rolled out, and I'm going to share more why that is. But the legislation calls for the U.S. Treasury of the United States to develop and pilot an electronic version of the U.S. dollar, and of course, 99% of the dollars we currently have in circulation are digital in themselves. So it's more so how will they restructure them, who will be the issuer, and as it's going to say here, they will not be looking to use the distributed ledger technology. So we'll see how that goes. To use for the economically marginalized or technically challenged. So that same buzzwords, it associates with the CBDCs, financial inclusion, bringing everybody in, and da-da-da-da. Yeah, okay. It said it would also maximize consumer protection and data privacy. So I'm not quite sure how we're going to get that data privacy in there without compromising all the KYC, AML, all the things that we currently have in this current banking structure. It's already there. It says, according to this principal sponsor Representative Stephen Lynch, chair of the FinTech Task Force in the House of Financial Service Committee, says, interestingly, ECASH is called, would be issued by the U.S. Treasury Department, not the Federal Reserve, which means it would technically not be a central bank digital currency, would be built on a blockchain, or require the internet to operate. Or, I'm sorry, nor would it be built on the blockchain or internet operation. So here we have two technological feats that I don't think our government has the capabilities of pulling off if it wasn't for the partnership in the private sector. And once again, I believe if this is something that actually moves forward, it's not about who issues it. It's more so selling it and preparing us for the back and forth that they're going to try to portray as to whether or not it should be the Treasury or the Federal Reserve. But in my personal opinion, it all leads to the need to restructure some our prior legislation to allow for the use of a digital version of our currency, because mind you, as of right now, using a solely digital representation of currency is not actual legal tender. And that's what this is all about, in my opinion. And it says the initiative isn't meant to necessarily preclude a Fed-issued CBDC. However, the pilot program launched by the ECASH Act will, quote, complement and advance ongoing efforts undertaken by the Federal Reserve and President Biden to examine potential design and deployment options for a digital dollar. So it's nothing new. It's more so, as I mentioned, it's designed to really create the narrative needed to discuss the digital transformation away from physical cash and the commercial bank digital ledger solely version of our currency that was what we've had for the last 40 plus years, 50 years with the advent of the computer technology. So let's keep moving right along. I want to jump into more because at the very bottom here, it gives you some details as to how they're going to try to pull that off. And it says, but with the ECASH, there will be no ledger, just as no ledger is used for physical cash transactions. It says this should appeal to privacy advocates and civil libertarians. So the fact that it is not on a ledger, as of right now, we'll find out how they're going to pull that off. It said, who wants to preserve anonymous monetary transactions? Digital ledger technology, even when decentralized, does not allow the complete anonymity. If you don't have a ledger, there's no one who can censor transactions and no one you have to ask permission for, according to Gray. So this is some selling words. They're trying to sell it with the fact that there is no single focal point as far as a public ledger, i.e. deferring it from the blockchain network stuff. But then again, this eCash version, according to the way they want to try to sell it to us, it also doesn't have a distributed ledger technology where there's no public ledger that is publicly visible. And so how they're going to try to roll this out, this is what they're trying to sell us on. Keep moving right here. It says, how would it work? eCash could be exchanged by two individuals tapping their phones together. So you need a cell phone ultimately. It says it might be sent over distances like secure text messages, though this would require phone service, unlike face-to-face. It is intended to be easily used in a retail setting, and Gray envisions a future mobile phone app with 3 accounts or 3 options. And so here's where we get a little tricky. One for the owner's bank account, the second for a credit card account, and a third would be the eCash account. And so I've talked about, the idea of, utilizing mobile phones because that's predominantly what's used in a lot of second world, third world countries because they use their telephone minutes and things of that nature. So this new version here, or a restructured version of a eCash digital unit dollar representation, nothing new, but yet they're trying to sell it and get the conversation rolling. In my personal opinion, this is not about what's coming. It's about how they're going to frame it and sell it to the American public. And then they'll move forward with how they're going to roll things out. So there's more information there. But as you guys can see, anyway go, you would need a cell phone, you need an app, and then based upon how it's distributed, we'll figure all that out as they roll this stuff out. But this is coming from 4 politicians. And let me just dive further into who I'm referring to. So literally within the last hour or two, there has been a Twitter page created for the ECASH Act. So literally today, there's 34 files, 107 following. It says on March 28, which is today, Representative Lynn Chair, Garcia, Presley, and Tlaib, which is the Michigan representative, introduced the Electronic Currency Act and Security eCash Act. So as you go here, you can actually click on the act and dive into the act. So let's dive into it real quickly. And of course, I'll put all this information for you to find more about it for yourself. But just, on a preliminary run, we're just going to scan through it real quickly. So here are a couple questions. We got 15 commonly asked questions. What does an ECASH Act do? What is ECASH? What is ECASH device? What is an ECASH device? What is a bearer instrument? Yada, yada, yada. We're going to dive into this further, but give you an idea here. One thing that caught my attention, and it all has to do, as I said before, creating a framework so that they can make the legislative adjustments so that digital representations of a dollar can become legal tender. That's what primary purpose of this is, I believe. It says the ECASH Act defines ECASH as a currency instrument that is, number one, the very first one. They have to now structure this rebranded version of a dollar and make it legal tender. And that is the number one thing. Legal tender issued by the U.S. Treasury and a general obligation of the United States not included in calculations of public debt subject to limit under the debt ceiling. So this, in a way, resembles what almost took place 1962 or 3 when President Kennedy decided to reinstate silver in the form with the silver certificates back into circulation, and that did not go too well. Shortly thereafter, it was removed by Lyndon B. Johnson, and that was all she wrote, with actually having the treasurer of our country, the United States Treasury, issue currency. Those days are long gone. So here we have 4 politicians, which are more progressive / liberal than anything else, trying to placate towards libertarians and, the civil rights type of movement of having people who are concerned with too much government. They're trying to sell this as a way of privacy and all those other benefits resembling what gold and silver used to be, but it's still digital at its core. So that's why I'm even more skeptical. Then it talks about the bearer instrument, interoperable. That's something that I've always talked about. You need that digital ledger type of technology to have it interoperable. And then it talks about, importantly, ECASH is not. So this is a counter to the CBDC narrative, so they can make it appear as if there's 2 combating forms of currency out there that we should all consider. The ECASH, which is the Treasury version, and the CBDC, the Fed coin. Though they're both, they're different in nature because one is by our government. So you got a lot of people who are going to jump on board. It's for the government. That's by us, for the people. Okay. And then the CBDC. Mind you, that's not the case. Let me keep moving. So I'll put this below if you guys want to dive further. But as I mentioned, it's all about the United States Commercial Code, legal tender status. They need to make some adjustments in this thing because it hasn't been tweaked in the last 80 or maybe 90 years, if I'm not mistaken, because they need to incorporate some type of lingo in here referring to the digital representation of currency, because that wasn't existent this is a long time ago. But 31 U.S.C. Code subsection 5103 gives the legal tender status. The United States coins and currency, and soon to be, they're going to put a comma, and they're going to say United States coins, comma, currency, comma, and digital representation, digital assets, whatever. And then, of course, they threw in, 90 years ago, including the Federal Reserve notes and circulating notes of the Federal Reserve banks and national banks, are legal tender for all debts, public charges, taxes, and dues. So this is what ultimately this is going to boil down to. It's going to open up that discussion further on them being able to implement and tweak the United States Commercial Code to make it lawful, legal tender currency on top of all the other things, because they no longer honor the coinage acts that actually establishes gold and silver as legal tender. But we know what's really happening. So keep it moving right along. So one thing I did do briefly, because I've talked about the EUS dollar. So let me find it. I have talked about, no, I did. Let me see where to go. So I have talked about the EUS dollar in times past. So this is from last year. BTC and the EUSD, Financial Surveillance Systems Activated. And this was when Jerome Powell came out and started talking about needing to have the discussion, talked about the white paper, and the white paper took an entire year plus. White paper came out, and on top of the executive order, and all the executive order was about was basically giving the Federal Reserve the permission to begin ramping up the study of the CBDC and how it's going to roll out. So 2 weeks later, we now have the ECASH Act, which is something that is proposed by, once again, the same actors, just a different side of the aisle, or maybe the same side of the aisle, talking about the ECASH app. So now we have an executive order and an ECASH act on the table for discussion, all leading towards basically, as I said, tweaking the legal tender status and giving the digital representation more leeway moving forward, well before that next currency or economic collapse that we have occurs. So this is what's happening in the news. This is just a short rundown, introduce to you guys, give you guys something to think about. But here's also something that will be very alarming. The word ECASH has been trademarked. And so eCash, as I mentioned, is nothing new. Utilizing digital representations of currency is quite old. It's almost 40 years old. And I actually found a little information here, and I'll leave you guys with this. The eCash was conceived by David Chaum, if I'm saying this incorrectly, an anonymous cryptographic electronic money or electronic cash system in 1983. It was realized through the corporation DigiCash and used as micropayment systems at one U.S. bank from 1995 to 1998. So the eCash is nothing new. And this was a different way of having the banks use their own private style approach towards electronic currency. And it goes deeper here as to how it operated. eCash software on the user's local computer stored currency in a digital format, cryptographically designed by a bank, which is what is already possible. This was possible 40 years ago. Now, just to put the word here, signed by a bank, signed by the U.S. Treasury, the eCash would flow through the system in the same magnitude. It says a user could spend the digital currency at any shop accepting eCash without having to open up an account with the vendor first or transmitting credit card numbers. So 40-year-old idea. It's trademarked. So we'll see how the eCash Act and what they call it. But once again, the EUSD is still on the table. It's all about getting us ready for how they're going to roll it out. And more importantly, on their end, they got to cross their T's, dot their I's when it comes to getting it legally certified and approved. But anyway, just want to take a quick minute, share my 2 cents, let you know what's developing. Curious to hear what you guys think. Feel free, as always, to leave a comment down below. And if you're new to the community, I want to encourage you to subscribe, click the bell notification, and also leave your comments down below. We can talk about this later at 4 p.m. on the People's Talk Show, where you get a chance to let your voice be heard. Be blessed, be safe. See you later. Peace.